we're going to bring you to our next session. I'm delighted from New York. We're joined by Controller Tom DiNapoli, who's certainly the greatest ally and advocate we have for the peace process in the Empire State. He has stood with us every step of the way in this peace process. He's kept his promises. He's visited repeatedly with the help of Pat Doherty, Cathy McCormick and others in his office. He has been very vigilant, watching out to make sure that we continue to make progress. And we want to see him back. I had said to the Controller we wouldn't invite him back to Belfast till we had a government, and thankfully we now have that. And he's responsible for the pension funds of the retirees, the public service retirees in New York, a very progressive politician, but fiscally prudent, which is what you want in the person who's looking after your pension funds. And he's used those pension funds to make sure that he drives change in many parts of the world, but especially here in the north of Ireland. He's joined by Conor Murphy, who's our fantastic finance minister. The only thing I hear about him is he's much better than the last guy, but I'm told he wasn't at a great shakes anyway. And to chair today's session, we're joined by a great progressive leader at the vanguard of change in Belfast, Suzanne Wylie, the Chief Executive of Belfast City Council. We've been trying for many years to get Suzanne to attend the New York New Belfast conference, but it's always a time of year when they change and hand over the mayorship, and she's been unable to do that, but we've got her today, and we're very grateful to Suzanne. So I hand over to Suzanne Wylie.
Thank you very much, Marching, and I am really delighted to be interviewing these two great men this afternoon. Obviously, we're going to get a bit of fighting talk this afternoon because the title of this session is Fueling the Fight Back, and it's all about the financial firepower that can be used to ensure that we have economic recovery. So two men that know all about financial firepower here to be interviewed for the next 20 minutes or so, and both from very different backgrounds and both from different cities as well. So, and clearly do have very different backgrounds on their Zoom calls too, I can see. So, so first of all, I know Martin's introduced you, and I'm not going to add to those introductions, but what I would like to do is for the two of you just to introduce yourselves very briefly. So first of all, Tom, great to see you. And Tom, I think it would be interesting. I know you have been to New York, New Belfast maybe 7 times over the last number of years, so a real stalwart of New York, New Belfast. But maybe if you could tell those of those people in the audience that don't know you, just what your affiliation is for Belfast and what you've done here. Okay, so I'll come back to Tom in just a second. So we're going to hear from Conor first of all. So Conor, obviously you've been Finance Minister since January. Probably not. You're probably not doing the job today that you thought you would be doing, given the last 3 months. So do you want to just give the audience a flavour of what you have been prioritising over the last 3 months?
Thanks, Suzanne, and it's good to see yourself again and to see Tom. I know he's having some difficulty getting joining in with us, but hopefully we'll pick him up very shortly. You're right, we came back into office just 5 months yesterday after a 3-year hiatus in the power sharing institution. We knew we had very significant challenges. It's difficult managing a 5-party coalition. We also had the uncertainty of Brexit to face us and still to face us. We have had the 9 years of austerity policies from London, which have severely reduced our public finances. And so with all of those challenges, we knew we were facing into tough times. And then on top of that came the COVID-19 pandemic. So it has been a very, very significantly challenging time. My priority, obviously, as Finance Minister, has been to assist the Executive to respond to that. We have tried to ensure...
Sure, and I'm hoping that you could hear me because we're having some...
We set ourselves some priorities.
Go ahead, Conor.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. We set ourselves some priorities in terms of the financial support that we got across from London.
No,
we're on the health
I'm listening to you on YouTube.
Crisis that the pandemic was causing to get support very quickly onto the ground to assist businesses who essentially had gone into lockdown and were suffering severely economically, and also to protect the vulnerable in society. And in that regard, we have invested a significant amount of money in the health system. We've recently procured some very vital health supplies in terms of protective equipment from China, and we have managed to reprofile some of our own local manufacturing base and secured some supply from them as well. And we have pumped about £700 million worth of support into business right across Belfast and across the rest of the north as well. That's in a combination of direct cash grants to small and medium enterprises, a business hardship fund, and also rates relief, the tax that we face on business, where we initially, I suppose like everyone else, try and get a handle on what the impact of this pandemic would be, offered all of our businesses a 4-month rate holiday, 4 months tax relief. And then from that, we've designed a more tailored, tax relief package, which looks at those businesses which are going to suffer the most as a consequence of this lockdown, and will struggle to survive in emergence from that, and the challenges that will continue to have for us. So we focus very much on hospitality, on retail, on tourism and leisure, and also on childcare, because childcare is going to be a vital component in terms of getting our economy back again. And we also then put a support package into our airports because we're a small island. Connectivity is hugely important in terms of economic recovery and sustaining our economic growth. And so those have been the focuses. In terms of vulnerable people, we wanted to ensure basically people had food available to them, and there's an enormous number of food packages went out to those who were classified as vulnerable in our society. And through our Department of Communities, we've been putting support packages onto the ground to community organisations, to voluntary organisations, to try and make sure that they're reaching out. That the effect of lockdown, of isolation, of poverty aren't more severe than they ordinarily would be. And we try and get support packages to people to try and provide for them. So those have been our broad themes in terms of support. And what we've tried to do is which is probably unique in our system of government, is to get that turned around in a matter of days and weeks, and cash out onto the ground very quickly. Schemes that would ordinarily have taken a year to develop and to turn around, we've been trying to get that support very quickly. And then those have been the priorities. So where we felt we faced into enormous challenges in January, we didn't anticipate the level of the challenge we were facing, and we're thus far, I think we're managing to get through that. Of course, there continue to be challenges, and we're now starting to turn our attention to how we emerge from lockdown and how we try to rebuild the economy, and how do we try to give support where it's needed in the time ahead.
Sure, great. Thank you, Conor. And it's great to see the shops being allowed to open here as well from today. So that's great to see, and obviously no mean feat. And I know from being on the front line, out talking to the businesses and out talking to communities, that they're really grateful for the fact that government and particularly the Department of Finance has been so fleet of foot in getting that support out there. So obviously lots of challenges facing our city and other cities across the world, including New York. Conor, what do you think, just taking a bit of a look forward now, what do you think the main challenges are facing Belfast as we move forward?
Well, I think there are common challenges for both cities, and that is to emerge from lockdown safely, to try and get the economy reopened, rebuilt, to try and bring some degree of normality back to people's lives, but to do so in a manner which continues to protect people. There have been a huge amount of sacrifices. We very fortunately have not had the experience that other countries have, and indeed other cities like New York, in terms of loss of life of frontline staff who've been trying to protect us. So enormous sacrifices have been made, and we have to be careful in terms of emerging from lockdown that we don't create more health crisis. And also our message has to be very steady, so that the public understand it, because public cooperation in fighting this pandemic has been key to our relative success in recent times. And so we need to ensure that message continues to be straightforward, to be measured, to be easily understood by the public. And that means there had to be a confidence in bringing people along with us. So while we want not to keep any restrictions in place one day longer than they're absolutely necessary, we want to ensure that the public continue to understand that a virus is out there, it's still killing people, it will still be transmitted, the more social interaction there is. So the more we ease that lockdown, the more we potentially increase the possibility of the virus starting to ratchet up again, and we have to be prepared for that. But I think that what we need to also do is give hope to people that there is another side to this, that we recognise very clearly that people and communities and businesses have all been impacted on by this virus, by the pandemic that we've faced, and that they need support to come out the other side of that. And we will work with them. I think that's a challenge right across the world. The challenge for our city is a challenge for New York as well.
Okay.
We need to ensure that we can try and come out of that.
Can I hear us?
Okay, and obviously we've heard the news of the last few days here in Belfast about Bombardier, and we've heard about the depth of the economic impact during April, for example, down by 20%. So how deep do you think the recession is going to be, Conor? And having said that, how much debt should we or could we take on to help fuel recovery?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to predict exactly how long this recession will last coming out of the other side of this pandemic. Firstly, we have to get to a situation where we actually have the pandemic defeated. We have to have a vaccine available. And it's anybody's guess how long that would take. Our emergence from lockdown measures, our rebuilding of the economy has to take into account the fact that those actions could actually cause the pandemic to increase again and might, in circumstances, and we've seen this happening in South Korea, for instance, where lockdown measures had to be brought back in to deal with the challenges of what was going on. So we need to emerge in a very measured way, and we need to ensure that we do so in a way which allows us to gradually open up the economy to sustain that return to economic activity, and also recognises the fact that the recession will go on for various sectors of our industry, for tourism, for hospitality, for leisure. The social distancing is going to be with us for some time, and that's going to have a real impact on them.
Sure.
For some sections of our industry, orders are going to be very difficult to manage globally over the time ahead, and that's going to have a real impact on them. And we've seen job losses, as you say, announced with Bombardier, and I expect, although I'm not looking forward to that's going to be the case among other sectors of manufacturing. What do we take to try and restore that? I think that we need to borrow as needs we much do. The executive here in Belfast is limited in its borrowing ability, but certainly we continue to talk to Treasury. My own department of finance talks to Treasury on a daily basis. I talk to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury on a very regular basis to appraise them of the difficulties we're facing and of the measures that are needed to support us emerging from that. And so if borrowing is required, then I think that's what needs to happen. But we need to try and stimulate economic recovery, because if we don't apply support and encouragement and stimulus in the areas that will need it and the areas that can recover quickest, then we will prolong the recession. And poverty and the loss of jobs will all have a deeper impact on our society on the back of the consequences of the health crisis that we faced.
Okay, thank you, Conor. I'm hoping, Tom, that you could hear all of that. I know we had a couple of problems there, but I'm hoping you could hear all of that from Conor. And just to turn to you now, Tom, and in terms of New York and what you know about Belfast, what kind of leadership, Tom, do you think is really needed to ensure that we actually accelerate recovery in our two cities?
Suzanne, thank you, and my apologies for the technical challenge. And unfortunately,
I couldn't hear anything that Conor said, but he looked very good with whatever he was saying. And let me just say it's a privilege to participate again in this conference. We'll look forward to when we can do it in person again. And my friend Marcino Mulier owes me a selfie, because that's always what we would do as part of this conference. Certainly from our perspective here in New York, not just for New York City, but for all of New York State, we are dealing with how we envision the new normal in the COVID-19 pandemic crisis as we navigate through that. In New York, as you know, we've turned the corner in many ways on the public health side of it. but the economic damage to businesses, impact on revenues coming to the state and localities is severe. And of course, as you know, we have a tremendous amount of social unrest in the aftermath of the brutal killing of George Floyd. So we have a lot of issues that we all have to work on. And I know you have some of the same issues in Belfast. You know, I think the challenge for all of us is to re-envision what business priorities and needs are. We need to make sure that we have a renewed commitment to inclusion. I know that's been a big focus of certainly the work in Northern Ireland over the years, and we've been proud to have played a part in that with McBride principles and some of our investments. We're having some of the same sense of priority here in New York. How do we rebuild the economy in a way that all communities benefit? So looking for a renewed focus on use of technology, obviously a renewed discussion on public health and what that means, both from a governmental and a business perspective. But right now, in many ways, it still feels like we're in the middle of it. And the other piece that we're concerned about here in New York is what additional help can we expect from the federal government? Because there's no doubt we can't navigate this on our own.
Yeah, so sounds like a very similar situation to here in Belfast as well. Just to go a bit further with you, Tom, in terms of investment funds themselves, like the one that you run in New York, what do you think the role of investment funds is in recovery? And obviously there's going to be a lot of pressure on those funds, like the New York pension fund. And is that going to mean that it's harder for you to make further investments? You've already put £30 million into startups here in the north. Is it going to be harder for you to do that in the future? And what role do you see for these kind of funds going forward?
Well, I think the short answer to that is our commitment in terms of seeking investment opportunities in the north of Ireland. That commitment continues, and that's a personal commitment from me, and it's a commitment from our team here at the New York Pension Fund. That being said, our pension fund is not immune from the economic consequences of the COVID-19 crisis and what that has meant to business activity and corporate profits and the ways in which we make our money. So, we end our fiscal year at the end of March. It was a tough time to have to value our funds. So we're going to have a negative year. We haven't had a negative year for a while. But we also, as a pension fund, are a very patient and long-term investor. So we're confident we'll weather this tough time. And because we went into this challenging moment in our history as a well-funded pension plan, we can still be very nimble. We can still seek out opportunities. And look, are there risks in this business environment? Absolutely. But there will also be new opportunities. So, we're challenging our staff to seek out those opportunities, certainly here in the U.S. But we have certainly found that Northern Ireland is a place of great opportunity. Given the talent, the creative energy, the real hunger of the people of Northern Ireland to put the past behind and stay on a forward momentum. And so, we have always viewed investing in the North as something that makes good business sense for us. And we'd like to think that our investments also play a role in ensuring equal employment opportunities and business opportunities for all the people in Northern Ireland. So it's a way in which we in New York, as we care a great deal about what's happening in Ireland, we could be a part of your progress, part of your continued evolution on a peaceful path. So in terms of our commitment, it's there. In fact, I should mention that I have signed off on a new allocation of another $30 million US dollars, specifically targeted to investment in the North. We obviously have many different investments across all of Ireland, but I'm very proud of the fact that our pension fund has consistently said when we talk about investment in Ireland, we also target a portion of our capital specific to the north of Ireland. Certainly Belfast has been a very fertile area for us to have that investment activity. So the commitment is there. I've already signed off on another 30 million allocation. We're doing the final work as far as processing the paperwork that's required to deploy that money, but we're going to be partners with you for a long time.
That's very reassuring. I'm very pleased to hear that. And just looking forward then, Tom, in terms of the sectors that you are particularly interested in this new world that we're entering into, what advice would you give us here in Belfast about the sectors that we should focus on, that funds like yours will invest in? And also, how will we attract more of those kind of sectors to set up their roots here in the north?
Well, keep in mind we're very much generalists in how we approach this. So, we charge our investment partners who will be on the ground actually sourcing the opportunities. That just as a general proposition, look for companies, businesses that are well capitalized. Certainly, companies that are in a growth mode in terms of trying to expand their customer base. And companies and entrepreneurs that want to invest in their people, their employees, the most important capital resource. We certainly have had some success with our investments thus far in Belfast and in the north in the technology sector. And no surprise, that's the growing sector here in the U.S. and globally as well. I think given this journey past the pandemic, obviously a renewed discussion about healthcare as an opportunity for investment in terms of medical technology and providing medical services. So I think that's a clear area. How we have to reimagine the education environment, both university level and even pre-kindergarten through high school. So I don't think there's any one particular sector of the economy we'd be looking for. Again, it gets back to the creativity of the people of the north, of the people of Belfast. You have a young and vibrant workforce, a lot of smart people, so we're looking for creative opportunities, and we really don't limit our investment partners in terms of what they should be looking for. Look for a great opportunity. It might be in some of the traditional, business services sectors or manufacturing where we've done some investments in the past, but we are very open to really any new idea, any new sector. So just make sure you have a good business plan, that you're well capitalized, that you're investing in people, and make a pitch to our partners that are going to be on the ground there. And we're very much open for good opportunities.
Again, that is a very reassuring message for us here in Belfast, given that two of our real growth sectors are in technology and in health tech and health diagnostics in particular. So just before we finish, I'd just like to ask one final question to both you and to Conor. So if you were to give us one piece of advice about an area to focus investment in, both through the private and public sector in Belfast, what would that be? So I go to Tom first and then to Conor, and I'll say thank you very much, and then you can lead out on those final responses.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Again, apologize for the complication in the logistics. It's hard to come up with one area. You heard what I said about the different sectors. I just think we are compelled with the time that we're going through to really think differently. So, I would just say unleash whatever creative ideas you have in ways to be successful from an entrepreneurship point of view. But, getting back to what I said earlier, because, it's a dynamic in Belfast and Northern Ireland, it's a dynamic here in the U.S. While we're always looking first and foremost at the bottom line to make money for our pension fund, that's what we need to do to provide retirement security. The kinds of investments that, from a long-term sustainable perspective, are ones that put a priority on investing in people and ensuring that both in terms of the workforce internally and the impact in the larger community, that it's an inclusive strategy. And so the people dynamic, I think, is key. And, the other area, if I had to pick one other one that I hadn't mentioned, I know it's an issue all across the globe, certainly in your community as well. We also have a renewed focus on looking for investments that are related to climate solutions. Opportunities to deal with the risk of climate change, not only for the planet, but for us as investors. And it certainly gets back to that issue of creativity. We have an allocation of $20 billion, some of which has already been deployed, where we're looking globally for climate solutions. So that would be a particular challenge I would put out there. If you've got any entrepreneurs or businesses that are focused on that area to be part of the emerging low-carbon economy, we very much would love to partner with you on that.
And we certainly do have that, and we'll introduce some of them to you. So, Conor, last word goes to you.
Well, thanks, Suzanne. And I just want to thank Tom for all of his continued interest in Ireland. And I last met him at St Mary's on the Falls Road in one of his many, many visits. And I welcome the ongoing commitment. He's been with us through tough times here, and now we're in tough times globally, and he's still with us and still committed to supporting economic prosperity here, and that's really encouraging. And he's right. I think we have to think afresh coming out of this pandemic about what our priorities are. I think we have to look at what is critical to society here going forward, and that's investment in people, but also investment in some of the supplies which are so necessary to us. You know, it's half the world has been chasing protective equipment from the other side of the world. It's things that are own manufacturing base here can manufacture their properly directed towards all of that. So I think we have to look at what's critical in terms of supply to us as a small island, as this is part of a small island. Food manufacturing of critical medical supplies, and then also investment in people, recognising that a lot of those services that we took for granted when we really were faced with enormous challenges were the ones that we relied on most to try and see us through this. So those are a couple of areas I think we have to start to rethink. What is our priority? Is cheapest price on the far side of the world and undercutting our own manufacturing base the way to go forward? Or is it that more self-sufficiency in these areas, more security of supply rather than price of goods that should be the priority? And I suppose if there was one sector that you've asked and around, Suzanne, I think childcare is going to be essential. I mean, we can't get back to emerging from into a new normal and get the economy up and running again without proper, affordable childcare. And I think an investment in that helps more people to get back to work, but helps people to actually come out and have fulfilled lives and to learn new skills, to bring them back into the workforce and to make people economically productive as well and more fulfilled in their own lives, to get that level of support that they need. So, and also investment in early years is going to be so key in terms of our education going forward. We have a very highly educated and skilled workforce here, but there is some investment needed in those very early years to make sure we sustain that. So I think one of the key areas that we need to look forward